I think the biggest concerns are for the second consecutive year, Nick Saban has to replace both his offensive and defensive coordinator. So that's obviously not an easy task. And then you add in the fact that over the last 2 years, Saban will have had to replace a dozen assistant coaches. That's a huge amount of turnover. But before we start feeling too sorry for Alabama, keep in mind they do return Tua Tagovailoa at quarterback and his top two targets, Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs. Alabama did lose a lot on defense, but they historically do, and Saban just basically reloads every year, so I don't think that'll be an issue. And then you look at the schedule. The best way to describe it is it's a cakewalk. Alabama's been favored in 54 consecutive games. At the end of this year, they will be favored in 66 consecutive games. Their marquee non-conference game is against Duke. In the SEC, their toughest game is at Texas A&M. And then they get LSU and Auburn, both in Tuscaloosa. And then one final positive note for the Crimson Tide. You go back the last 5 years, and Nick Saban and his buddy Bill Belichick have alternated championships, Super Bowls, and college football national titles. The Patriots have done it in 14, 16, and 18. Alabama in 15 and 17, or in 2019. So it looks like it's Alabama's turn to win another one. I think Georgia's a legitimate national title contender. They're obviously the best team in the SEC East. And then you look at the last 2 years, they should have beat Alabama, obviously could have beat Alabama in the national title game 2 years ago and in the SEC championship last year. The biggest positive for Georgia is they returned quarterback Jake Fromm. He no longer has to worry about looking over his shoulder at Justin Fields. Fields is transferred to Ohio State. And then you return running back DeAndre Swift, one of the best running backs in the country. And as a bonus for Swift, he'll be running behind 4 returning starters on the offensive line. Another bright spot for Georgia is last year they started 11 freshmen or sophomores. So those guys are going to be a year better, a year more mature. That's a positive sign for the Bulldogs. And then you look at the schedule, obviously the tough game in Jacksonville against Florida, that's no change. But they only have 4 true road games. So I think Georgia could be a real contender for the national title in 2019. You know, I'm going to go with Mississippi State. I really like Joe Moorhead. I think he's going to have a big year in year 2. A lot of coaches, Nick Saban at Alabama, Bob Stoops at Oklahoma, Pete Carroll at USC. They've had major improvement going from year 1 to year 2. This will be Joe Moorhead's second year in Starkville. They returned 4 starters on defense, 7 starters on offense. They do have to replace quarterback Nick Fitzgerald, but Keaton Thompson, the new quarterback at Mississippi State, I'm told there's a buzz in Starkville about him. He has that it factor. So I think this could be a big year for Mississippi State. And you look at last year, their 4 losses in SEC play, all 4 teams finished in the top 12 in the country. This year, Mississippi State gets LSU and Alabama in Starkville. I think Mississippi State could be a big surprise. If they can win the SEC, that's obviously a big if, then they will be a national title contender. But as you mentioned, they got to get past Alabama, and don't forget about Georgia out of the East.